What's good, y'all? And welcome back to another preseason preview video. In this video, we're going over the Dallas Mavericks. Sorry for the lack of video over the weekend. I was dealing with a little bit of a sickness, but I am back and healthy, so the videos are back and will be on schedule from now on. And if this is your first preseason preview video you're seeing of mine, basically what I do is go over all the offseason moves of the team and then peek into the future and try to predict what we can expect from them coming into this season. And as a reminder, make sure you leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you already haven't, and let's get right into it and talk about the additions the Dallas Mavericks made this offseason. After making it to the finals, the Dallas Mavericks were not satisfied and wanted to improve their roster even more, so they went out and got Klay Thompson in a sign-and trade. They traded for Quentin Grimes and then signed Najee Marshall. I really like the moves that the Dallas Mavericks made this offseason, starting off with Klay Thompson, of course. Personally, when it was more rumored that Klay was not going back to the Warriors, I was thinking he was going to go to the Lakers. I know LeBron said he'll take the pay cut for him. He would be able to stay in California on the West Coast, still have his boats and everything. But I really do like the fit for Dallas. Of course, ultimately, that's where Klay ended up going in the sign-and trade, and I feel like he's going to be a perfect fit next to Luka and Kyrie. I know Klay Thompson is not the player he once was before he went down with all those injuries, but I do think he is a little bit overhated. I do think he still is a very productive basketball player. He still is one of the best catch-and-shoot three-point shooters in the entire NBA right now. We saw when he was playing alongside a bunch of talent like Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and all those guys, how much he was able to capitalize off the defense having to focus on them. Same thing here in Dallas, or similar thing here in Dallas, where the defense is going to be focused on Luka, focused on Kyrie, and I'm sure both of those guys are going to very much like the spacing that Klay will provide for them, as well as allow them to capitalize for when they get the double team or the defense collapse, they can kick it out and Klay can catch, shoot, knock down. I also really do like the trade for Quentin Grimes, only giving up 3 seconds and getting off Tim Hardaway's contract. I feel like the value there is incredible. And for those of you guys that don't know, I am a Knicks fan, so I was able to watch Quentin Grimes' pretty much whole career up until this point, and I really do think that he can add a lot of value here in Dallas. A lot of the things I was saying about Klay Thompson when it comes to spacing the floor and being a catch-and-shoot, threat, Quentin Grimes can do that as well. I really do like the way he attacks closeouts. He's athletic. He's on the younger side, so it allows Dallas to get a little bit more youthful. And the number one thing that I really do like that he brings is defense and effort. Quentin Grimes will fight on every possession for defense. You can stick him on the best guy on the other team, and he will make them work for everything. Really scrappy defender, really physical defender. I love that pickup for Quentin Grimes. And when you're talking about scrappy and defense and effort, all those things also describe Najee Marshall. It seems like Dallas kind of had a vision going into this offseason, collecting all of these guys here. I like the size that Najee brings to this team, being that, around 6'7" range on the wing, playing defense. His shooting is kind of iffy. He doesn't shoot a lot of them, but last year and for the Pelicans, he was very efficient when he was taking those shots. So it seems like Dallas really wanted to spread the floor and add a little bit more defense, and that's exactly what they did with these 3 pickups. Dallas did have to give up some stuff in order to bring these guys in, though, so let's take a look at some of the losses they had this offseason. They did end up losing Derrick Jones Jr. in free agency. He signed a new contract with the Los Angeles Clippers. They had to include Josh Green in the sign-and trade for Klay Thompson. He will now be playing in Charlotte. And then Tim Hardaway Jr., as I mentioned before, was traded away for Quentin Grimes. And when you look at these losses on paper, you can argue that Dallas lost a bunch of key contributors from their team. But when you really look more in depth into it, I don't really see it as too much of an issue. In a way, they kind of replaced these 3 guys with the same archetype of players, but arguably better. When you start off looking at Tim Hardaway Jr., he was their 3rd leading scorer in the regular season. When it came to the playoffs, he really wasn't in the rotation too much. But when you talk about a guy that comes in as just like a flamethrower, can shoot a bunch of threes, catch heat at any moment, they replaced him with Klay Thompson. Very much a upgrade in my eyes. It's very clear Klay Thompson is a much better player than Tim Hardaway Jr. Then you look at Josh Green, who is the catch and shoot threat, the defender, the young guy. They replaced him with Quentin Grimes, who's the catch and shoot threat, the defender, the young guy. Then you look at Derrick Jones Jr., who's the lengthy point of attack defender on that wing position. He can guard multiple positions. They replace him with Najee Marshall. This is the one position where I could say that they kind of did downgrade. I do really like Najee and the stuff that he brings to this team, but Derrick Jones Jr. was such an important piece to their defense. Regardless though, as a whole, if you take the 3 players they lost and the 3 players they gained, I would say it's definitely an upgrade. And now that we have an idea of what this new and improved Dallas Mavericks team looks like, let's take a look at a potential rotation. Of course, they're led by their star-studded backcourt of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, alongside Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, and Derek Lively to round out the starting 5. Then off their bench, they have Jaden Hardy, Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, Maxi Kleber, and Daniel Gafford. I feel like people have been saying this for the last few seasons now, but this really finally feels like the year that Luka might actually win MVP. I know he's been a candidate for pretty much these last 4 years at this point, but now that he's made it to the finals, he has a team that I think is going to be one of the top teams in the West this season. I really do feel like this could be the year. I just feel like this is the best team that has been built around Luka in his career. It might not be the most talented, I mean, arguably it is the most talented, but just fit-wise and scheme-wise, I really feel like this is the best complementary roster around Luka he's ever really had. Of course, he has his very talented second-hand man, Kyrie Irving, who's coming off of one of his best seasons of his entire career. Super efficient scorer. Whenever Luka needs to hand the ball off or needs to close out a game or whatever it is, Kyrie Irving is right there next to him and ready to do whatever it takes on the offensive end. Then their newcomer, Klay Thompson, that they brought in the sign-and trade, I feel like he is a great player to put along Luka just to spread the floor. I kind of talked about it a little bit before, along with the fact that Klay is now returning to that third option that we haven't seen since before his injury. I'm sure that's going to make things a little bit easier for him on the offensive end. I've also been very, very vocal in the fact that I think Derek Lively is the absolute perfect center to put alongside Luka Doncic. He's going to be heading into year 2 after a very impressive rookie campaign. Then when you look at the rest of the role players around him, it definitely seems like the Mavericks had an idea of improving their 3-point shooting. When they made it to the finals, their ultimate downfall was the fact that no one on the roster besides Luka Doncic could knock down a 3. I think through the first 2 or 3 games, everyone else was 1 of 20 something from 3, which is absolutely insane. Klay Thompson is going to help that. Quentin Grimes is going to help that. A healthy Maxi Kleber is probably going to help that. So I love the roster construction of this Dallas Mavericks. They definitely improved after making it to the finals last year, and that's not something a lot of finals teams can say. Now that we have an idea of what this roster looks like though, let's take a look at the strengths of this team. The Dallas Mavericks have tons of size and length across the board at all positions. As you can see, 8 out of the 10 players in the rotation are 6'5" or taller. The 2 guys that are under 6'5" is 6'2" Kyrie and 6'4" Jaden Hardy. I didn't actually realize how big this Mavericks roster was until I really took a deep dive into it. I know it's kind of obvious on paper because they have Luka Doncic, who's 6'7" at the point guard spot, Derek Lively, who's 7'1" at the center position, but really beyond that too, they have a bunch of length across the board. Najee Marshall, I mentioned before how he brings length at that wing position, being 6'7". Maxi Kleber too, I know he runs some small ball center, but when he's running power forward too, 6'10" at the power forward spot, that's definitely a lot of size as well. It just kind of makes it easier for them to match up with a bunch of different teams that also are going to have size. Teams like the OKC Thunder, who they probably will have to go through, having Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein, also a big guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander running the point guard spot, or even Minnesota, who they might have to go through again in this Western Conference with Rudy Gobert and Cat. Having this amount of size just makes it harder for other teams to get a mismatch on offense. When your point guard is 6'7", you can't really post them up on a mismatch. When your center is 7 foot, you can't really exploit him if you have another big body center because he's big, he's got the length. The Mavericks were a great team defense, especially post-trade deadline last season, and I'm sure their size was a big part of that, and I think that that's definitely going to help them more into this season and kind of continue that trend of being a good team defense overall. And real quick before we get into the weaknesses, I do also think that the Mavericks are going to be a very good offense. Of course, when you're led by Luka and Kyrie, you're probably going to have an above average offense, but when you add in all this extra spacing that they brought in this offseason, I definitely see them making a run for maybe even top 5. No team is perfect though, so let's take a look at the weakness of the Dallas Mavericks. I think it's very safe to say that on most nights, the Mavericks will be closing out with Luka, Kyrie, and Klay Thompson at their point guard, shooting guard, and small forward. And you might be asking yourself, yeah, what's the weakness in that? And in my eyes, the weakness is pretty glaring, and that is, of course, their perimeter defense. I mentioned before a big reason the Mavericks struggled so much against the Celtics was their three-point shooting, but another really big reason they struggled against the Celtics was the fact that Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White, whoever it was able to get to the rim pretty much at will by just blowing by their man. And that was with Derrick Jones Jr. being on the roster and on the floor most of the time. Albeit he did not have the best finals performance whatsoever, but he still is a much better perimeter defender than any of those three guys that I put up on the screen. And now the fact that he's not on the roster and one of those three are going to be on the perimeter having to guard up, it really does worry me a little bit. And I've seen some people say, oh, well, they still have PJ Washington, who's a great defender, so he should be good. They should still be solid. Yeah, kind of. PJ is a good defender, I will give you that. But to put him out there and say, yo, guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for a 7-game series, what do you really think is going to happen? But we did see PJ have some pretty good possessions against Shai, so maybe that, we'll give him that. All right, now go out there and guard Ja Morant for a 7-game series. I don't know about you guys. I love PJ. I don't think that he can guard a guy that is as fast and as shifty as Ja Morant. So the fact that they do have PJ and Derek Lively down low guarding the rim or guarding, being in help, it definitely helps them, and I don't think they're going to be a terrible defense. But I also could see times where maybe Quentin Grimes or Najee Marshall are kind of forced to close out games because they just need perimeter defense on the team. And when you go out and you get a guy like Klay Thompson, you want him to be able to close out these games. You want his spacing to be able to be out there. You want his offense to be able to be out there. And I'm sure, Quentin Grimes and Najee, they can bring some of that shooting, but nowhere near as much as Klay. And obviously, I don't know Klay Thompson personally, but from everything I've seen, he's a very prideful man, he's a very competitive man, and he's gonna wanna be out there on the floor closing out games, almost proving himself, if you wanna call it that. And hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jason Kidd already had these conversations with Klay and said, yo, we're gonna try to close out with you in some games. In some games, you will close the game out. But if we need defense, you're going to be the first one on the bench. Maybe they had that conversation. Maybe Klay is 100% fine with that. He doesn't care. He just wants to win at this point. Could be the case. Regardless, though, I would assume when you make that sign and trade, you want Klay to close out games. And if he is closing out games, that defense could get a little shaky. And unfortunately, I do not have a fan to represent the Dallas Mavericks, so there will not be a fan segment in this preseason preview video. So that means that we get right into it and talk about the ceiling, the floor, and my expectations for the Dallas Mavericks. Starting off with the ceiling, I feel like they could be as high as the 2 seed out west. Like I said before, I love the moves that the Mavericks made this offseason. They're coming off a finals appearance and they got arguably better. Not even arguably, I would say they objectively got better. So I can really see them having a great regular season. I think they're going to be a good offense, a good defense, and they're going to be very competitive out west in a very competitive Western Conference. Then when it comes to the playoffs, I would say that this Mavericks team, as a ceiling, could win a championship. Obviously, they were just there last season, got better. So, I mean, yeah, they could happen. Then when you talk about the floor for the Mavericks, I could see them falling as low as the 6th seed. At that point, when you're a 6th seed, you'd probably versing someone in the first round like the Thunder or the Nuggets or the Timberwolves or the Grizzlies or a top tier team. And it would be pretty hard to beat them. So I could definitely see them being a first round exit as a floor. But my expectations for the Mavericks this season is probably to land around the 3 or 4 seed, have a very good regular season, and then a pretty deep playoff run, making it to the conference finals, where they ultimately will fall to one of those top teams like the Thunder or the Nuggets or the Timberwolves. What do you guys think though? Let me know in the comments below where you think the Mavericks will end up in the standings this season. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the description, there's links to all my social medias, so make sure you follow me on all those to keep up to date with me. Catch y'all.